I'm Francisco Perez Arce from also from CIPHER at USC. The last, but definitely not the least, panel is on public goods and social protection, which is an important topic, very related to our previous session as well. So let's just go ahead and start with Necati Celik from the Financial Health Network, who has been working on the Financial Health Pulse Survey. The floor is yours.
All right, excellent. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Necati from Financial Health Network. It's always great to be here, and I share this sentiment that Wandy shared before, which is it's kind of heartbreaking to be doing this online, because I was in Washington, D.C. last year, and it was great to be around others. But I'm sure that next year we'll go back to that normal, hopefully. And today I'll talk to you about initial findings from our ongoing research on the effects of unemployment insurance benefits on people's financial behaviors, looking at some financial transactions from people's accounts, actually. This research was made possible by our funder, Citi Foundation, and our research partners, USC Center of Economic and Social Research and PLAD. So the research questions that we ask here, there are two of them. The first one is, how does receiving unemployment benefits affect the short-term savings behavior, particularly for those who are unemployed? And also, how does receiving unemployment benefits affect credit card spending and debt, again, for those who are unemployed? Based on prior research, we hypothesized that receiving unemployment benefits would lead to an increase in liquid account outflows and balances, an increase in credit card payments, but a decrease in credit card spending and balances. To avoid the omitted variable bias, we use a simple fixed effects model, including interaction of employment status and unemployment benefits, because people who are not unemployed will not be receiving benefits. We exclude those who leave the labor force during the study period. So unemployed group only include people who are either temporarily laid off or actively searching for a job. Also, we include people on leave in the employed category. Data comes from two different sources. We actually married our US FIN data, which is our transactional sample that we have been collecting since mid-2019 in partnership with USC and PLAD. We invited 9,000 panelists from US sample, and about 900, a little bit over 900 of them linked an account since 2019. Not all these people actually ended up staying in the samples. So there was attrition, and some accounts were inactive for a long period of time. So we had to filter some of those accounts out. So after all the necessary filtering, we ended up having 290 people in the liquid accounts set, and little over 300 people, 335 people with credit cards linked. Now, liquid accounts for people who are in the liquid accounts data sample, they have at least one checking account present that passes our filtering criteria. And on top of that, any other accounts that are liquid accounts, like savings accounts, prepaid money market, cash management accounts, we add those as well to the checking accounts that they have. So that's the US side of the data, and the other part of the data comes from the 19 COVID surveys that US panelists respond to. So this is a bi-week data set, and we started with the wave 0, which was the earliest wave, and that started in March 11, and then it goes to December 8th, the 19th wave, I think. So our sample is definitely not a national representative one, because first of all, it's a small sample, and more importantly, we have an overrepresentation of young people, high-income people, Asian or white people, and also no representation of females, women in the liquid account sample especially. So let's keep these in mind while we talk about the results here. So we will see actually a lower unemployment rate compared to what actually went on in the country during this time frame. So, and some of those mismatch between what we see here and what we actually saw in the economy might be due to these demographic differences. Speaking of unemployment, these lines show the number of people who are unemployed and whether they receive UI benefits or not. And we see that stark, a very large number of unemployed in April, which starts declining after that. And when we look at overall numbers, after dust settles, we're looking at about 20 people per bi-weekly period that are unemployed. And what is interesting is that we actually have more unemployed people at any point in time that who didn't receive a UI benefit, which is the purple line, than the number of unemployed who received UI benefits. So that's kind of interesting. So to see whether fixed effects regression is actually a good modeling strategy here, we also looked at time variation in unemployment and UI benefits to see if we have enough within the variation there to be able to fit a fixed effects regression. Some mixed results here. We see that unemployed people who are unemployed, unemployed people were unemployed about 70% of the time. So that's the left side within percent, 73%. Whereas employed people were employed over 90% of the time in either of the samples. People who did not receive benefits over 90% of the time, whereas those who did receive benefits only received it around 40% of the time. So we see that both unemployment and not receiving benefits are a lot more stable in terms of within the variation compared to being unemployed and receiving benefits. So it seems like we have sufficient variation here to fit a fixed effects model, but let's see what the results tell us. Some time trends here. We'll take a look at the bi-weekly trends in liquid accounts by employment status and receiving UI benefits first. We'll start with the balances. It's also worth noting here that these lines are drawn after applying low smoothing to median balances in each bi-weekly period. And because we have quite small sample sizes here, especially after we slice it across these three categories, we want to avoid any outliers that are affecting the trends significantly. So that's why we decided to go with the median trends. Unemployed people receiving UI benefits had balances on par with employed people earlier periods. In fact, balances grew for this group, people who are unemployed and receiving benefits, from June to October, followed by a steep decline from November to December. So we see that nice increase, and then a sudden drop. Unemployed people, on the other hand, not receiving UI benefits, had far less in liquid account balances in April, and then it steadily declined throughout the period. The outflows from liquid accounts shows a little bit different and perhaps contrary to expectations trend here. Because we hypothesized that people who are receiving benefits that are unemployed would actually have an increase in outflows or perhaps steady outflows relative to those unemployed people who are not receiving benefits. We see the exact opposite here. We see that unemployed people receiving UI benefits had steadily declining outflows, whereas unemployed people who are not receiving benefits had steady outflows, albeit perhaps less than the other group. But then September onwards, actually after the end of September, we see that trend going up. The credit card balances shows a story that is in line with our expectations. We observe a declining trend for the unemployed who received benefits, whereas the balances for those who did not receive benefits during unemployment goes down from July to October, but then climbs up in November and December. So there's that fluctuating credit card balances. And then the difference becomes starker between these two groups after September. Spending, credit card spending is again a mixed story here. We start with a big difference in spending between people, unemployed people who receive benefits and unemployed people who don't receive benefits, but then the gap closes and the trends get similar around September. Same thing for credit card payments. They start high for unemployed people receiving benefits and then declines to a level which is very similar to the other two groups actually. So fixed FX regression. Let's see if we can confirm our hypothesis here, maybe some of them. We're going to start with the first one, which stated that receiving unemployment benefits will increase liquid account balances relative to not receiving it. We find weak support for this, so the effect is positive. The directional is correct, but when we look at the 95% confidence interval, it's a vast interval. It is significant within with alpha 0.10, 0.1, but it's a weak support. The effect is about 22% increase in liquid account balances when an unemployed person receives the benefits versus when they don't. So it's a sizable effect for sure, but our confidence in this effect is weak. The second one about liquid accounts, which was we hypothesized that benefits, unemployment insurance benefits would lead to an increase in outflows relative to not receiving it. We don't see this by any stretch of statistical inference here. It's again a vast confidence interval, and it just, the effect is not there simply. Now for credit card balances, we actually see a significant effect here. Again, a vast interval, and the top end of the interval is actually very close to zero. It just barely clears the bar there. But we see that credit card balances for unemployed people were 21% lower when they received unemployment benefits versus when they did not. The hypothesis about credit card spending is not supported. And same thing for payments. That's not supported either. And these two last unsupported hypotheses actually makes this a confusing conclusion because we are left with a puzzle here. So we see that there's some evidence of UI benefits positively affecting liquid account balances, but not the outflows. So we didn't look directly at the inflows, but our guess is that inflows might be driving here, obviously, because it's a direct inflow to liquid accounts when you receive UI benefits. And there's also evidence of UI benefits negatively affecting credit card debts, the amount of credit card debt people carry, but we can explain whether it's because of outflow, the payments, or because of the spending going down, because we don't see any effect there. So obviously there's a lot more that we need to explore here, and as next steps, we like to look at the heterogeneity of some of the effects that we have seen across different demographic groups. We don't have sufficient sample size to do so yet, but we are working with USC to expand UAS-FIN sample to new panelists for UAS. And we also want to look at other time variant factors that most likely played a role for within variation in balances and account behavior, basically. And taking those factors will be definitely instrumental in this kind of analysis. We also want to look at different outcomes other than balances and payments and spending, such as frequency of credit card use, how frequently people went to their credit cards, how much interest charges were there in these cards, late payment patterns on credit cards, and overdraft behavior in checking accounts. And of course, we would like your feedback on possible other directions that we can follow here. This is at this point an open book for us. We just started this analysis, but it's an interesting and rich data set that we have right now after marrying the UAS-FIN and USC COVID surveys. So we'd like to hear your suggestions on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Necati. This is very, very interesting. there are some questions coming on in the chat, but let me just start with a clarification question from me. So could you clarify what definition you use of unemployed?
Yeah, so for unemployed, we excluded people who said that they were retired, or they were on disability, or they left labor force, because so the unemployment definition comes directly from the USC COVID surveys. So we are still working on actually improving the way we define unemployment, because we just married this data set, and we need to go back to the survey engineers to understand like how the transition between different types of labor status happens, and what we should be excluding and what we should be including. But our idea is that we want to go with the official definition of unemployment, which includes only people who are out of job, but they're actively searching for one, or if they're on some sort of temporary leave. So they're not searching for a job, but they're unemployed.
Yeah, so I think trying to use the official definition of unemployment is tricky, partly because the UAS survey is not designed with that definition in mind. But more generally, because at the beginning, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, it wasn't clear what looking for a job is. People were not able to just go around and knocking down in businesses and meeting people, which is how people usually look for work. So that may be something that you may want to consider to relax in the future, maybe just looking at people who lost a job, for example. But let me go to one of the questions in the chat from Jeffrey Groen. He's asking, in your data on receipt of unemployment benefits, can you tell when people start receiving and when they stop receiving?
Yes, again, that information all comes from the COVID surveys, the longitudinal sample, and we can see when they said, yes, I'm receiving benefits, and when they say, no, I'm not receiving benefits. We can identify the timing of that for sure.
Jeremy Burke has his hand raised. Do you want to jump in?
Sure, yeah, very interesting, Necati. I wondered, one complication in this time period is that unemployment insurance is not the only influx of cash that people might have, right? The stimulus payments also may contribute to some of the sort of strange findings. I wonder if you have sort of accounted for or try to control for who received stimulus payments and perhaps amounts that may sort of contribute to different findings on the credit card spending behaviors.
Absolutely, that's a great candidate for one of the time variant factors that we should be including. We started with the most basic model at this point to see if we can detect with a very simple model any effect at all. And then because the more we include, the harder it's going to be on this sort of model that only takes into account the time variation. But yeah, stimulus checks and also a number of hours worked as well, because there are a lot of people who were employed, but they would still qualify for unemployment benefits actually, because with the expansion of unemployment benefits through the pandemic, some people who work part-time would qualify for unemployment insurance to receive benefits. So taking those factors that vary over time, like whether someone receives stimulus checks or not, perhaps how much they received it, along with other factors that change over time, will be definitely important for us to control for, to see whether it was some other factor or just unemployment insurance benefit, and perhaps how much people received in benefits as well. That's going to be important for us. But yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Yeah, related to that, I thought that one thing that could be interesting and fairly easy to look at is just to look at the change in the amount predicted by the drop from when they dropped from 600 to 300 for the federal part of an insurance during the summer, and just look at what the effect of that particular drop was. That probably would be a big
great.
Amount.
Great suggestion. Thank you.
If there aren't any other questions, we're out of time for this presentation.